1. My childhood home was a small farmhouse in the country on 7 acres. Half of our property was cedar forest, and the other half was fields, and we had horses, chickens, ducks, bunnies, dogs, and all kinds of other critters. In many ways it was the perfect idyllic home, but there's always a dark side. There's still a lot I don't know about the home and the people who lived there before us. But what I do know is that they were weird AF super-religious fanatics, and they were Y2K preppers. Nothing against preppers, I'm a bit of a prepper myself. But I think we can agree Y2K preppers are a special breed. There was a basement in the house, and at the bottom of the stairs to the basement was a bulletproof door. There was a room in the basement covered floor to ceiling in shelving and stocked with canned goods and preserves. On one of the shelves there was a tiny piece of fishing line, and if you pulled the fishing line, it opened into a secret room under the stairs. The first year we lived there, the cops came looking for the son of the previous homeowners. They combed the property, and it was unsettling. My parents extensively remodeled the home to where it was unrecognizable from what it looked like when we bought it. Things were good for a few years, and then my dad died in a tractor accident on the farm when I was 15, and my little brother was 12. The events surrounding his death are a mystery to my family to this day. As you can imagine, we were all devastated by my father's death. Personally, I went a little off the deep end into partying, but also into spiritualism and occult things as well. This led to some strange experiences, which I may tell someday. I've always considered myself to be a spiritual person with an interest in occult things. When I was in my 20s, I had my come-to-Jesus moment and became interested in Christianity. Of course, I couldn't just go to any regular, boring old church, so I found myself in the weirdest, witchiest, they would never describe themselves as such, evangelical charismatic church in my town. I am now free from that church, which is more of a cult than a church, and I no longer hold the religious beliefs I adopted during that time, but these details are pertinent. So when I was 20, I moved back in with my mom and brother in my childhood home. My bedroom had been in the basement, and I went right back down. All I can say is I was trying to read the first Twilight book. Everyone was obsessed with it, and I wanted to see if it was any good. Spoiler, it was so boring and nothing happened. I don't believe that a spirit was invoked by the book, but you just never know, so I'm sharing that detail. So anyway, I was about halfway through the book one night and was ready to sleep, so I put it down and went to bed. At some point I woke up and there was a man standing at the foot of my bed, and he was just staring at me. My room was pitch dark, yet I could see the man perfectly. He wasn't glowing, and there wasn't light shining on him, rather it was as though he was illuminated by his own light source. He had very pale, pasty white skin and a round face with fat cheeks. He was squatty in stature, a bit rotund and chubby. He had black hair on the sides and back of his head, bald on top. His eyes were completely black, and he was staring right at me with palpable hatred. In horror, I somehow knew that he couldn't touch me, but that if he could, he would kill me immediately. I have no idea who this person is. I've never met anyone who looked like that. And if I were to see him in real life, I would recognize him instantly. I sat up in bed and tried to scream, but I couldn't make my voice work. When I finally was able to scream, he disappeared. Shortly after this event took place, my house was infested by giant houseflies. We thought it was because we forgot to do the dishes before taking a weekend trip, but the flies were down in the basement too. Bulletproof door? And coming out of the rafters. They were nearly the size of horseflies. My mother and I rolled up magazines and were smashing the flies. They would look smushed, but about 5 minutes later would twitch and start flying around again. My mom and I were so horrified that we just broke down in tears in my bed, holding hands, crying and praying. And Mom and I did not have a relationship like that at the time. Not sure what happened with the flies other than they were gone in a few days. When I finally told my brother about the man at the foot of my bed, he told me an interesting story. Sometimes my brother would just sleep in my room if we were up late playing video games in the basement because my room had 2 beds. He told me that one night he woke up and saw a man standing next to my bed. He sat up to say something, and then the man was gone. He thought he was dreaming and went back to sleep. I called my brother before posting this to see if he remembered this event, and he doesn't, but he reminded me of something I had forgotten. When I used to sleep in an upstairs bedroom, I kept hearing something or someone knocking on my window at night. My whole family kept trying to figure out what it was. Branch, bird, we all heard it. We could never figure it out, deciding it was a creepy neighbor playing tricks. The man at the foot of the bed has haunted my mind for over 10 years now. I will never forget his appearance or the expression of his face. I have never experienced night terrors and have never seen something like that before or since. Because I was in my Christian phase, I believed that I was under spiritual attack from demons or something that was pissed that I was following the Lord. After getting out of the cult, I became uncomfortable with anything spiritual and chalked it all up to psychosis. Now that I'm healing the spirit wound that church gave me, I'm again starting to think it really happened, but didn't necessarily have anything to do with my burgeoning Christian values. Regardless of why or what it was, it scared the fuck out of me. 2. So I recently had my mother-in-law's friend come to the house to drop some stuff off, and I briefly met this woman twice, but I finally sat down and spoke to her as she decided to sit with my great-grandmother for a few moments to catch up quickly. She was in the hospital for a perforated bowel. She mentions that she reads people, so I looked at her, and me being a semi-skeptic due to tons of false readers, I told her to have a go at me. Her response, "Honey, I don't force readings. They will come to me when they please. However, your grandmother said if you're getting that SUV, take the bracelet from the rear view mirror and put her on your left wrist." Mind you, I have never sat down with this woman until today. She knows absolutely nothing about me. Only my mother, Jiajush, and fiancé know about the car I plan to get. Now, no one even knows about my grandmother's bracelet in my car, as it looks like a string. It has the pictures of Mary and Jesus, but I'm not religious. I took it because it was hers that she wore 24/7. Either way, she mentions a few things out of the blue during multiple topics that no one knows, not even my fiancé, until I mention an experience with a spirit. Here's how it went. I swear that something is attached to me. So many of my items go missing for 2 days and appear back where I last put them. Honey, it's a little girl. She's been with you since you were a kid. She's mentioning something about an orange cat that was hiding under your bed that wasn't really there. Also, she loves to play. She says something about her best friend, but she keeps calling you sister. She's saying she died at 5, but she is revealing herself as 3. No, I was attached to a boy, and I swear that cat was under my bed, but my mom said it was on the counter. She steals chargers and keys, right? But she hasn't stolen anything recently, correct? Yeah, I yelled at her a few weeks back because it caused an argument with me and my fiancé when I kept getting aggravated by my charger disappearing. Mind you, that was plugged in my car, and no one's allowed to use my car. It's my first car I got at 21. My mom gave it to me for free. Sue me. Talk to her. She wasn't trying to be mean. She wants to play. Since that conversation, I told her I wasn't mad, that I was just scared that she was a demon. And as I type this, I remember I had 2 imaginary friends, a boy and a girl. But I hated the girl because she kept moving my VHS tapes and moved my brat stalls a lot. The boy was relaxed and only played with me. I feel as though I sound a bit crazy. But now that said, I'm not mad. I have a feeling she's going to get active again. 3. It was November 1996 and I was 9 years old. I grew up in Walbur, Massachusetts, in a house where my grandmother lived with us in her own in-law apartment in the basement. My parents and brother had already begun their long journey of driving to Florida. I stayed behind with my grandmother because we were going to be flying down the next day with my aunt, uncle, and cousins. Instead of sleeping in my own bedroom that night, I slept downstairs in my grandmother's bedroom. I remember stirring and waking up at around 4 a.m. I sat up in the bed and looked around the room. There was a figure standing near the door that led to the garage. What was even more bizarre was that this figure was only about 1.5 feet tall. I remember squinting and letting my eyes adjust, and yet the figure was still there. I was so terrified that I rolled over, faced the other direction, and shut my eyes as hard as I could. My troubles didn't end there. More experiences happened even after arriving in Florida. We stayed off property at the Days Inn in Kissimmee, which is now called Celebration Suites. All of the events that we experienced in Florida happened on our very first night at the hotel. Throughout the night, our hotel received a number of unnerving phone calls. My mother was the one who answered them all. I remember one of the phone calls was a guy who was telling her that he had seen her at the party last night. In another phone call, a completely different voice was convinced that my mother was in fact their mother. They pleaded with her until she simply hung up. I remember my family and I being completely disturbed by these phone calls, especially my mother. It was especially unnerving because it was clear to everyone that these weren't prank calls. Each of them had been a different person. There was no laughing or snickering in the background. And the conversations themselves weren't based in humor whatsoever. The final thing that happened that night was definitely the worst out of everything. We were all woken up by the sounds of laughing kids running by our room over and over again. The hotel is set up motel style, meaning that our door opens to the outdoors, with our room being in the middle of a long stretch of other hotel rooms. It had to have been after midnight. The kids would start at one end, run past our room, reach the other end, and turn around and start it all over again. The sounds of laughter and sneakers trampling by the door was endless. My father finally sat up in bed, and he was pissed. He got up and made his way over to the door. As we all looked on, wondering what he was doing, he turned to us and made a shh gesture with his finger. It was then that I realized my father was planning on scaring the kids. He was going to wait until they were running right outside of our room to fling the door open and yell at them and scare them off. He waited, and when the running and laughter was just outside our room, he flung the door wide open and yelled to no one. There was not a soul outside, no running, no laughter. Just the sounds of traffic and insects. Four. This happened to me while I was still in high school. Would have been somewhere around 2005 or 2006. To this day, the experience gives me chills and I cannot explain it. I am interested to see if someone here has experienced something like this or heard of it before. After church one Sunday night, my friend and I were taking my cousin back to his house before heading to a restaurant to meet some friends. My cousin at the time lived way back in the woods some 6 to 8 miles down a very secluded gravel road in the Ozarks of Missouri. It was in the fall, so the trees were bare. It was a new moon and very dark. Anyway, my friend and I dropped my cousin off without a hitch and began making our way out of the woods back to the main country road that would take us back into town. About halfway down the gravel road back to the country road, we came around a curve and started heading up a small hill that crested about 60 yards ahead of us. When we saw this hill, there looked to be a single deer standing on the crest in the middle of the road. Being that this is the middle of the country, this was not too uncommon, obviously. So I thought nothing of it and figured it had run off as we got closer. I remember very vividly that as we about halved the distance between us and what I thought was a deer, it became very apparent to me that this was no deer. Instead, it was a very solid but translucent ball of dense fog, or mist about the size of a large deer. It was not standing on the road, but hovered about a meter above it, and was not moving. At the time, I thought I might be seeing a big smudge on my windshield, so I reached up to wipe my window. It was not a smudge, and it remained on the road. When we got close enough that my headlights illuminated this thing in full, it slowly rose up in the air till it was about 20 feet off the ground, paused for a second, and then shot off very fast into the woods to the right. I stopped the car, and both my friend and I sat in silence for about 5 minutes. We then continued to the country road, where my friend, who does not curse, finally broke the silence. He said, "WTF was that?" We still talk about this today. The experience was quite jarring, and I will not drive down that road again at night. Does anyone here know what this might have been? 5. So this is a bit of an older story. I didn't really get to thinking about it recently, but when I remembered it, I realized there hadn't been an encounter for a while. I thought I should reach out and ask for advice or thoughts. Sorry if this doesn't make sense. I mostly want to know if anyone else has encountered a being like this, and share my experience with a good spirit. We lived in our current house for about 8 years now. In our last home, we were stalked by or always aware of something living with us. There are several stories there, but that's not what this is about. We built our new house through a housing program. help build your house, and live in it for a reduced price. Suffice to say, my mom and I, who were sensitive to spirits, were relieved after no longer feeling what was in the last home. A brand new home without previous inhabitants to suck up energy or emotion from. Within a month of living there, I noticed a presence. Interestingly, it wasn't humanoid, which is what we're used to. I have a dark grey cat who follows people just to watch them, and a brown tabby cat at the time we first saw the spirit. The first night I encountered the spirit, I was brushing my teeth when I thought I saw my cat walk into the room with me. It was a dark, cat-sized thing, so I naturally assumed it was my grey cat. I turned and saw whatever it was zip into the hallway. I jumped out into the hallway to reaffirm what I saw, but whatever it was now gone. To describe that split second, there was a small creature that had been by the door, but when it left the bathroom, it sort of lost its shape. I thought it was a piece of cloth or laundry that had been knocked into the hallway, but obviously it wasn't there when I went and looked for it. Later, my mother mentioned seeing what seemed to be a ghost cat that changed shape and disappeared under her bed, or in her closet, I don't remember, as a piece of cloth. Sometimes people would come over and ask why we didn't introduce them to our third cat, or fourth after we actually got our third. Sometimes, when discussing ghosts and or cats, a guest would have a blank look over at their face, and they would ask if we had seen a black cat in the hallway, or if there was a black cat in the house. It was a little funny when you know they realized what they saw wasn't a physical form or even really there. I've had friends stay over and mention a black cat, and one explicitly described a cat shape climbing on my clothes in my closet. We later discussed it as a family to find out my little sister had seen the spirit too. My father dismissed it, but that would be expected by at least one family member. We've all had several experiences with the spirit, and have always had guests who mentioned it. Our other cats were never bothered by the spirit, and it never seemed to bother them either. My mother dubbed him, we assumed it was a him, no discussion, just mutual assumption, Chintz, because he would always turn into a cloth shape when spotted and disappear. He's a cat if you don't directly look at him, or acknowledge him, but quickly turns into a cloth or moldable shape once he realizes you've spotted him. We assumed he was a neighborhood cat that had passed away and found a new family or new cats to hang around. Unfortunately, we soon stopped seeing him. I think he was still there. Sometimes I could catch a black small shadow moving in the corner of my eye, but couldn't catch if it was Chintz. I could still feel him sometimes, hopping on the bed when there was no weight shift, and no cat when you looked. I guess sometimes he's just content that we know he's there, but doesn't have the energy to show himself physically. If you're wondering why I'm posting this, 8 years after the first encounter, if the presence has receded a little, well, we're moving in a few months. Last night is when I had my most recent encounter. He hopped onto my bed after I moved the cat tree into my room. My other cats weren't in there and my light was on. It made me realize it had been literal years since I had last encountered our ghost bat, and none of us had really mentioned him. I think he knows we're leaving and doesn't quite want us to go. I've started feeling his presence physically and thinking about our other animals a little more. He's somewhat been considered part of the family, and sometimes we mention him if something unexplained has happened. It was going to be sad to say goodbye in the end. If you made it this far, thank you so much for listening. And I would like to ask a question. Has anyone ever heard of a spirit that's able to turn into the image of an inanimate object? I've heard of ghosts, demons, spirits, and so on being able to shift between human images and animal images, but I haven't been able to find one about an animal that could change into an inanimate object. Chintz is the image of a normal-sized black cat that changes into a small piece of fabric when he knows he's been spotted. His size doesn't change that I know of, and all eyewitness accounts always describe him the same way, regardless of whether or not we've told them about a ghost cat. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 183. And thank you very much to everyone who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Well, this is where we are right now. I actually got very excited the other day when I checked Amazon, and I found a pack, well, not a pack, a value pack, it's 5 packets of Dettol antibacterial wipes, because those are the ones I like. Those are the ones I were using before the... Okay, I need to stop doing that. I keep calling this the apocalypse. I need to stop doing that. Those are the ones I was using, those are the ones I like, and you just can't get them in shops anymore because people are buying them all up. Fair enough, understandable. I'm trying to buy them myself. So couldn't get them in the shops, can't get them delivered because they come in stock and sell it really quickly. But couldn't get them delivered with groceries, that's what it is. By the time the actual delivery slot's available, they've sold out. But I saw them in stock on Amazon the other day, and I pounced. And thankfully, although you will find things on Amazon and eBay listed at prices for a single pack that I'm going to refer to as price gouging, these weren't. These were actually reasonably priced. So with any luck, I have 5 packs coming. I'm not going to keep all 5 packs. It's 5 packs of 100 each. I don't need all those. I'm going to give a couple of packs away to my sister, whether she wants them or not. I'll personally feel better knowing that she and the rest of the family has them. So that's where we are. I'm getting overjoyed by antibacterial wipes. Yep. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.